So all of this sort of, so diabetes, like it's going up to number 14, but you can have diabetes and iron deficiency anemia and tuberculosis all at the same time. And if you die you can have all of those three things and die, and then someone has to decide which one of those things you died of. They're not talking about the interaction of these things. So, first, there's no such thing as disease. Second, if there was, its burden couldn't really be counted because all of these things are not mutually exclusive. And then the third thing, I think, is the real killer, that even if you could, it wouldn't be worth doing. So the idea of, burden of disease is like the volume of human suffering, right? So these are two diseases. You can tell that I go to the 7-Eleven late at night. But last night was yogurt and jelly. So this is bigger than this, yeah? So these are, imagine that the volume of this is a measure. This is disease A, and it's got this volume, right? This is the amount of human suffering, disease A. This is disease B. Now, I think, you can see that this has a bigger burden than this, yeah? Now, if you could eradicate a disease, A or B, which one would you eradicate? If you had a choice, you can eliminate one of these diseases from the face of the earth, which one would you eliminate? We've taken into account human suffering in the disease burden. We've taken into account the numbers of deaths, the number of life lived with disability. They've measured them on the same metric, right? So we're measuring suffering on the same scale. A, B, which one would you eliminate? A. Get rid of A. Yeah, let's eliminate disease A. That's the obvious thing to do. Yeah, we would definitely eliminate the problem with the biggest burden, and that's very good. The only thing is, I don't believe we eliminate disease anymore. How many diseases can you think of that we've totally eliminated? I can think of a few. You must be able to think of a few. Your public health students. Smallpox, yeah. So we eliminated smallpox. Polio, maybe. Polio's on the edge. Might eliminate polio. But what about? Do you think we'll eliminate heart disease? We've tried for quite a while. Do you think we'll eliminate depression? Or what else? I don't know. So it's very unusual to eliminate disease, I think, So if these measure the burden of suffering, I don't think we're going to eliminate things. But what we do is we can try and reduce the amount of human suffering from diseases the best we can. And if we do that, then it's not about the size of the disease. It's about the effectiveness of the interventions, yeah? So, like, these are interventions. So imagine these are full of liquid, like, this is an intervention for this disease, and this is an intervention for this disease. Now, this one is the bigger, and you see you can scoop out all of that suffering with this because it's a more effective intervention. Yeah? This is a less effective intervention. So the bigger problem, there's a less effective intervention. The smaller problem, there's a more effective intervention. So how much, now which is the most important problem? Because I can get rid of all of this just with one intervention. And this, it would take me much longer to get rid of that one. So it's not the size of the disease that matters. I mean, normally I do this with a bucket. I have a big bucket for one disease and a smaller pot for another disease, and then I can scoop them out. But these are the biggest things I could find in the 7-Eleven. So, you can see that, this intervention, less effective. So there's less gain in health from tackling this problem than you have with tackling this problem. So the size of the disease is completely irrelevant. The most important problem is the problem you can do something about. Yeah? So, if we go back to our disease charts, ischemic heart disease, number 1. Measles, number 56, right? Now, if with a million, if we've got, if a certain amount of resource, and we can get rid of measles really easily, we can vaccinate against it. We've got £1 million. We've got £1 million to spend. With £1 million, we can vaccinate everybody and get rid of measles. With £1 million in ischemic heart disease, we can do very little, say, if that was the case. Then what's the most important problem? The most important problem is measles. It's not ischemic heart disease. So the most important problem is the problem that we can do something about. So this idea that the most important problem is the one with the biggest burden is it's a big mistake that will cause, and I think maybe has already caused, a lot of unnecessary suffering. Because it means we're not solving the most solvable problems with the resources that we've got available. When you've got so much so what becomes really important is the cost effectiveness of intervention, right? It's show me an intervention that's effective, and then let's have a look at how cost effective it is. And if resources are limited, then you should put the best thing, the most important problem is the problem for which you've got the most cost-effective intervention. So, we should, this is a sort of hypothetical cost-effectiveness analysis. So this, we've got some different programs, different things we can do. This is the cost per QALY gained, right? So the incremental cost per QALY, the incremental cost per patient compared with alternatives. So if you have £1 million, you should invest it in the most cost-effective intervention first. So the incremental cost per QALY is lowest for this intervention, isn't it? So we should put most of our money here first. And then, when we've completely dealt with that problem, then if we've got any money left over, we should go for the next cost-effective one, maybe this one. And that's how we should be allocating resources. We should be allocating resources in a rational way, and not on the basis of this burden thing. This burden thing is just a mischievous nonsense that schools of public health love, because basically academics just compete with each other to say my problem is more important than yours. We have a series of lectures in the London School of Hygiene, and they're called Global Public Health Lectures, right? So they're Global Public Health Lectures, and they invite different professors to come along and talk about their problem. And they always say the same thing, They say, malaria is a huge problem, it's getting worse, my problem is the biggest problem in the world. And then next day there's somebody who's interested in obesity, and they say, obesity is shooting up, we're all going to be obese in 100 years' time, obesity's got to be number one. And then the mental health people say, my problem's bigger than you. It's ridiculous that actually people in public health are competing with each other about how big their problems are. I just think it's like childish, you know? Why, like I've worked on trauma and injury, but why would I want to promote something for trauma if, using that same amount of resource, we could save more lives treating malaria? For example, insecticide-treated bed nets are one of the most cost-effective interventions in the world, I think. It's probably one of the best buys in public health, right? So if you were talking to the Prime Minister of Malawi and said, right, okay, how much money have you got to spend on health this year? What should we spend it on? Well, where can we get the most benefit? Insecticide-treated bed nets, and let's do that. Let's do that first. I mean, why wouldn't anybody in public health say that? Just because they worked in the area of cardiovascular disease, they should still want the best for people of the world, shouldn't they? You wouldn't want to sacrifice, you wouldn't want to cause unnecessary suffering just to sort of make your problem sound more important. That's what I believe anyway.